Are we alone? It's one of the oldest questions humanity has ever asked. We search the skies, scanning distant stars and solar systems, hoping for a sign, any sign, that we're not the only ones. Yet, despite decades of exploration, we see nothing. No cities beneath Martian dust. No signals from Proxima Centauri. Not even microbial life in the cold oceans of Europa or Enceladus. And still, there are incidents, documented, recorded, remembered, that defy simple explanation. Some say these events are proof. Others call them coincidence. But each one adds a new layer to the mystery. Roswell, 1947. They said it was a weather balloon. Oumuamua, 2017. A strange object from interstellar space. Scientists said it was a comet, maybe a fragment of rock tossed across the galaxy. But others weren't so sure. These events, decades apart, may seem unrelated, but buried in official reports, eyewitness accounts, and declassified files are connections, patterns. Someone or something might have been watching us or passing by. This is not just a story about what we've seen, but about what's been kept from view. In the summer of 1947, something fell from the sky. Not far from Roswell, New Mexico, a rancher found strange debris scattered across a field. Metallic, lightweight, unlike anything he had ever seen. The Air Force arrived quickly. They sealed the site. They said it was a weather balloon, but the truth was far more complicated. Just months earlier, in utmost secrecy, the United States had launched a classified program, Project Mogul. Its purpose: to listen for the echo of Soviet nuclear tests, using high-altitude balloons fitted with sensitive instruments. To the public, it never existed. To those who knew, it was essential. But Mogul wasn't just about science. It was a cover, one that would blur the line between fact and fiction, for decades. The materials used were experimental. Foil-like metals, strange symbols printed on tape, unusual beams. To an untrained eye, it looked alien. When the wreckage landed in Roswell, the military had a choice to make. Tell the truth about a secret Cold War project, or let the public believe something else had arrived. In early July 1947, something crashed in the desert northwest of Roswell, New Mexico. A rancher named Mac Brazel discovered the debris, scattered over a large area. Strange metallic fragments, thin, flexible foil that returned to its shape when crumpled. Unfamiliar beams, odd, printed tape with strange symbols. He had never seen anything like it. He reported it to the local sheriff. Soon the military arrived. Within hours, the 509th Bomb Group, the most elite nuclear-capable unit in the U.S. Air Force, had cordoned off the site. They collected the wreckage. They spoke to witnesses. And then they made an announcement. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday. Roswell Daily Record, July 8, 1947. A flying disc. The front page lit a fuse that still burns today. But just one day later, the story changed. The military retracted the statement. They now said it was a weather balloon. For decades, that's where the official story ended. But decades later, declassified documents revealed a different truth. Not a flying saucer, not a weather balloon, but part of a top-secret program, Project Mogul. Mogul was an operation by the U.S. Army Air Forces to detect Soviet nuclear tests using high-altitude balloon arrays. These arrays carried sensitive microphones, radar reflectors, and experimental materials, some never seen by civilians. The debris Brazel found matched descriptions of a Mogul balloon. From the military's perspective, the explanation was simple. Not a UFO, not an alien craft, just Cold War surveillance cloaked in secrecy. But for many, the explanation came too late, too rehearsed, and far too convenient. Because what happened in Roswell didn't just vanish with the wreckage. It had already taken root. In public memory, in whispers, and in questions still unanswered. But not everyone believed the official explanation. Weather balloon, Project Mogul, experimental debris. It never added up for those who were there. Not for the rancher, not for the local mortician, not for the military officers who saw the wreckage and were told never to speak of it again. Behind the scenes, a different story began to circulate. One not found in official records, but whispered in classified corridors, and later echoed through declassified leaks and first-hand testimony. The wreckage wasn't just strange, it was otherworldly. Some claimed the material was impossibly light, yet couldn't be cut, burned, or torn. Some said there were markings, not flowers but symbols like writing no one could read. And then the rumors deepened, that beyond the twisted debris were bodies, not human, small, fragile, with large heads, large eyes, and maybe, just maybe one of them was alive. The wreckage, according to some, wasn't taken to Fort Worth, as the press was told. It was flown somewhere far more remote, far more secure, a place that didn't officially exist, not on maps, not in records, not even in Washington. Area 51. Built deep in the Nevada desert, Area 51 would later become synonymous with alien technology, secret aircraft, and black-budget experimentation. But according to some, Roswell was its origin story. A hangar was prepared. The craft, or what remained of it, was studied in secret. Engineers attempted to reverse engineer materials that didn't obey the known laws of physics. And the being, if it survived, was kept under tight control, studied, interrogated, observed, Sound, typewriter halts abruptly. Years later, former employees and military insiders would speak, carefully. Not always on the record, not always with names, but their stories align. There was a craft, there were beings. We've been trying to understand it ever since. If that's true, then Roswell was not a misunderstanding, not a cover-up of a balloon, but the beginning of a secret war to understand visitors from beyond. And Area 51, not just a test site, but a vault for the unknown. Roswell faded from headlines, but not from memory. Area 51 continued to grow on maps that didn't exist, while the official story remained unchanged. But just 5 years later, the phenomenon returned. Not in the desert, not in the shadows, but in the most heavily guarded airspace on Earth. July 1952, Washington, D.C. For 2 consecutive weekends, something extraordinary happened. Air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base picked up unidentified objects on radar. Bright returns, multiple targets, moving fast, changing direction mid-flight, appearing then vanishing. Pilots flying nearby confirmed it. Bright lights in the sky, sometimes orange, sometimes white, executing maneuvers no known aircraft could match. Jets were scrambled from Newcastle Air Force Base. But as the F-94 fighters neared the capital, the objects vanished. No contact, no interception, only silence. The next day, they returned. Again, radar lit up with fast-moving unknowns. Again, jets were scrambled. Again, the targets disappeared when approached, only to reappear once the fighters left. Panic began to spread, not just among citizens but within the government itself. Newspapers across the country ran the story. Saucers swarm over Capitol. Washington Daily News, July 1952. The Air Force was forced to respond. At a now famous press conference, the largest since World War II, Major General John Samford attempted to explain it all. He cited temperature inversions, radar errors, atmospheric phenomena. But behind closed doors, the military was alarmed. Documents released years later showed internal memos warning of the psychological impact of these sightings and the danger of mass panic. They didn't want the public looking too closely, and so they didn't. Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official UFO investigation program, would classify the case unexplained. In the wake of Roswell, and after the skies over Washington lit up in 1952, the U.S. military had a problem it could no longer ignore. Too many sightings, too many witnesses, too many questions. The government needed a response, something official, and more importantly, something containable. In 1952, the U.S. Air Force launched a program. It was called Project Blue Book. Its mission: to collect, to analyze, to explain away. Over the next 17 years, Blue Book would investigate over 12,000 UFO reports from military personnel, commercial pilots, police officers, and civilians across the country. Each report was categorized. But Blue Book was never just about science. It was also about public perception. Following recommendations from the Robertson Panel, a CIA-convened group of scientists in 1953, Project Blue Book shifted focus from studying the unknown to minimizing public interest. The panel warned that UFOs could be used to overwhelm air defense systems, or worse, cause mass hysteria. It was not about what the objects were, but about what the people believed they were. From that point on, the true goal of Blue Book was not discovery. It was containment. Cases were debunked quickly. Witnesses were often discredited. Strange sightings were explained away as weather balloons, atmospheric reflection, even flocks of birds. But some reports resisted explanation. Aerial phenomena tracked on radar by multiple stations. Objects outpacing jet interceptors. Close encounters involving radiation burns, missing time, or entire power grids shutting down. Even among Blue Book staff, cracks began to form. There is a cover-up. The Air Force is lying. Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, the first director of Project Blue Book. Ruppelt would later admit he believed some UFOs were machines under intelligent control, but his voice would be drowned out. The official conclusion of Blue Book, when it shut down in 1969, UFOs pose no threat to national security. There is no evidence they are extraterrestrial. There is nothing to see here. The case was closed. The files were sealed. But the sightings never stopped. Project Blue Book claimed to have an answer for almost everything. But not everything had an answer. Roughly 701 cases remained unexplained when the project ended. And among them were incidents that defied all logic, science, and military capability. The Mantell Incident, 1948. A year after Roswell, a U.S. Air Force pilot, Captain Thomas Mantell, is scrambled to intercept a large metallic object over Kentucky. He climbs above 20,000 feet. His last transmission. Object moving about half my speed, and it's still above me. Then silence. Minutes later, his plane crashes. He is dead. No sign of a balloon. No wreckage of anything else. The Air Force first blamed Venus. Then later, a secret Navy balloon. But to this day, no solid evidence confirms either explanation. The Lubbock Lights, 1951. Over Texas, multiple college professors and dozens of civilians witnessed glowing, boomerang-shaped lights moving silently across the night sky in tight formations. Photographs are taken. Blue Book investigates. No known aircraft could move like that, and no natural phenomenon matched the behavior. The case remains unresolved. Minot Air Force Base, 1968. A strategic nuclear base in North Dakota. Personnel report a glowing, disc-shaped object hovering near the missile silos. Simultaneous radar contact confirms the sighting. Security teams pursue the object. Communications black out. Some say launch control systems were momentarily disabled. The report, documented, witnessed, and recorded, was marked unexplained in Blue Book's own files. The RB-47 encounter, 1957. A U.S. reconnaissance aircraft flying over the Gulf of Mexico encounters an object tracked on radar, electronic warfare systems, and visually by the crew. The object maneuvers with speed and precision, far beyond any known technology of the time. It follows the plane for over an hour, shifting altitude and direction at will, disappearing and reappearing on multiple radar systems. The Air Force could not explain it, and they didn't try very hard. These were not vague lights, not shadows in the sky. These were military encounters, radar confirmations, multiple witnesses, and complete technological unknowns. Even within Blue Book, there were those who believed the truth was being hidden, not only from the public, but from the investigators themselves. By the late 1960s, Project Blue Book had run its course. The files were overflowing. The reports, thousands of them, kept coming, but answers were still missing. Inside the Air Force, pressure was mounting. Congress wanted clarity. The public wanted truth. And behind it all, the Cold War demanded distraction management. In 1966, a new investigation was commissioned, not by the military, but by science. The University of Colorado, under physicist Dr. Edward Condon, was tasked with producing an independent study of UFOs. It would come to be known as the Condon Report. For 2 years, the team reviewed case files from Blue Book. They interviewed witnesses. They reanalyzed radar data and photographs. Some researchers within the group believed the evidence was compelling, worth deeper study. But Dr. Condon did not. In 1968, the report was released. Nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge. Further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified. That one sentence became the government's final word. In 1969, Project Blue Book was officially shut down. The case was closed. The files were locked. The Air Force would no longer investigate UFOs. But many questioned the Condon Report itself. Some of its own contributors disagreed with its conclusions. A few resigned before it was completed. They claimed the process was biased from the start. That Condon had made up his mind before the first case was even reviewed. And in hindsight, that may have been the point. The government had what it needed, a scientific stamp of dismissal. From that moment on, the UFO topic was considered closed, not just in Washington, but in science, in media, and in public discourse. But the sightings didn't stop. The questions didn't go away. They just went underground. Because while the public was told there was nothing to see, behind the curtain, someone was still watching the skies. The case was closed. The government had spoken. Project Blue Book was over. UFOs, they said, posed no threat. There was nothing to investigate, nothing to see, nothing to fear. But something was happening, and it wasn't in the sky anymore. The sightings didn't stop. They changed. No longer just distant lights over farmland. Now, it was the hallway, the bedroom, the space just behind your eyes when you wake in the dark. And something is already there. Reports began to surface, not of crafts, not of radar blips, but of silence, of time lost, of dreams that felt too real, of waking in strange places, of not being alone. There was no longer an office to call, no number to report what you saw or what you felt. Blue Book was gone, and with it, any illusion of protection. In its absence, a vacuum. And in that vacuum, stories began to bloom like bruises. scattered, uncertain, but all pointing in the same direction. A shift had begun, from observers to participants, from distant witnesses to those who were touched, taken, returned, and forever changed. September 19th, 1961. A lonely road in rural New Hampshire. Betty and Barney Hill were driving home after a short vacation. The night was clear, the stars above still and familiar, until one began to move. A light in the sky, bright, silent. It followed them, first behind, then ahead, then beside. Barney stopped the car. He stepped into the night, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. An object, massive, hovering. Through binoculars, he claimed to see figures inside, watching him. Terrified, they drove away. But then something happened. Time passed, 2 hours gone. They arrived home, but things felt wrong. Their watches had stopped. Their clothes were torn. Their memories, fragmented, fogged. What they remembered made no sense. So they turned to hypnosis. Under trance, the story emerged. A craft, beings, gray-skinned with large black eyes, cold hands, a room filled with strange instruments, medical examinations, needles, communication without words. Betty spoke of a map, a star chart shown to her by the beings. She drew it from memory. Years later, an amateur astronomer compared the chart to real star systems. It aligned with Zeta Reticuli, a binary system unknown to most people in 1961. It was the first time anyone publicly described this kind of experience. The first time the word abduction was used. A disturbing account of visitors not from this earth. Skeptics called it fantasy, psychological projection, a dream. But the Hills were not attention seekers. They didn't want fame. And the story they told was echoed again and again and again by strangers across continents who had never met and remembered the same things. After the Hills came silence, but only for a moment. By the early 1970s, the stories began again, not from stargazers, but from ordinary people, mothers, truck drivers, teachers, people with no interest in UFOs until something happened to them. The details varied, but the patterns were unmistakable. A flash of light outside the window, the feeling of being watched, then weightless, paralysis without panic, being lifted, floated, drawn upward, through walls, through ceilings, into something waiting in the sky. They remembered metal walls, blinding light, cold air, and always a table. They couldn't move, they couldn't scream, but they could hear, not with ears, but with the mind, voices, without mouths, thoughts not their own. They described the same beings, though none had ever met. Thin, gray, hairless, black almond-shaped eyes, emotionless, efficient, watching. The details were too consistent to ignore, too surreal to accept, and often buried until brought to the surface. Hypnosis became a key, not to invent memories, but to unlock them. Therapists began collecting the stories, drawing diagrams, finding matches. The abductees spoke of screen memories, images implanted to mask the true experience. They saw owls staring through windows, deer standing still in the night, shadowy doctors in long coats, until the illusion slipped. Then came the truth. They weren't crazy. They weren't lying. And they weren't alone. Across continents, languages, cultures, they remembered the same rooms, the same beings, the same helpless silence. It wasn't about belief anymore. It was about patterns, and something behind those patterns watching. As more and more people came forward, one question echoed louder than all the others. Were they making it up? In the 1980s, two men approached the phenomenon from very different worlds. One was a painter, the other a Harvard psychiatrist. Both ended up staring into the same abyss. Some abductees felt violated, others chosen, but none of them walked away unchanged. Whatever this was, it wasn't fiction anymore. It was personal. It was real to them. And that is where the mystery deepens. Most don't remember when it starts, only that something was already watching. They come without sound, without reason, and without warning. You don't walk to them. You're taken. Some say it's a dream, but dreams don't leave scars, don't steal hours, don't erase you, then give you back. They don't need ships. They don't knock. They arrive when you're most alone, and when they leave, you're never the same again. The stories are disturbing, the details hauntingly familiar, but in the end, the question remains. Why? Why them? Why now? Why at all? Some believe it's biological, a harvest, not of food but of DNA. A quiet program, to hybridize, to adapt, to preserve, or perhaps to infiltrate. Others suggest it's not physical at all, not ships, not science, but psyche, a projection, a reflection, a symbol of trauma, fear, awakening. Jung called it the modern myth of things seen in the sky. But can thousands of people across decades dream the same myth together? Some say they're interdimensional, not from far away, but just sideways, a slip through the veil. Entities that intersect with us, not from other planets but other layers of reality. Others believe they're time travelers, not aliens, but future versions of us, studying what they once were, trying to correct something, or perhaps to warn us. Are they here to help, to guide, to accelerate evolution? Or are they cold observers, collectors, operating without empathy, without meaning? The theories multiply, but the answers don't. Every new story unlocks a new possibility, but every possibility leads deeper into mystery. What do they want? Perhaps not to be understood, perhaps not to be seen, or perhaps they're asking the same question about us. They were mocked, laughed at, dismissed as dreamers, liars, or worse. But they didn't go away. The abductees kept coming. Their stories didn't change, and the silence around them grew louder. They built communities, found each other, and realized they weren't alone. Popular culture took notice. Books, movies, television, not just entertainment, but mirrors, reflecting a fear that was spreading quietly just beneath the surface. From the X-Files to communion, from fire in the sky to late-night radio, the world began to ask what science had refused to answer. What if they're telling the truth? But behind the ridicule, someone else was listening. In the background, the intelligence community was still watching. They never stopped. They watched the patterns, tracked the encounters, filed the reports. They called it folklore, but kept the radar logs. They called it delusion, but scrambled the jets. And then they came back. Not the stories, the objects. But this time, we had more than memories. We had radar. We had infrared. We had pilots. We had data. And for the first time, we had proof. Bud Hopkins was an artist by training, methodical by nature. But after a friend told him of a strange encounter, missing time, strange marks and lights in the sky, Hopkins became obsessed. He began collecting stories. He cataloged similarities. He interviewed hundreds of abductees across the country. Quietly, carefully, relentlessly, patterns emerged. Scars with no memory of injury. Paralysis at night. Bright lights. Floating sensations. Rooms. Tables. And always the eyes. He published books. He was ridiculed. But he kept going. John Mack was a Pulitzer Prize-winning psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School. Respected, rational, cautious, until he started interviewing abductees. He expected delusion, or trauma, or fantasy. What he found was something else. These people were not mentally ill. They weren't unstable. They were frightened, confused, but sincere. Their stories carried trauma, not invention. They wept. They shook. They remembered things they wished they didn't. And again, the details were consistent. Mack began to question the limits of reality itself. What if these stories are real, he asked. Not just psychologically real, but real. That idea, so simple, so dangerous, cost him his reputation. But he kept going. Are these experiences dreams? Shared archetypes from the collective unconscious? Ancient fears in new form? Or are they contact? Mack suggested something few dared to. That reality might be stranger, more fluid, more permeable than science allowed. That beings might reach us, not in ships, but in consciousness, through dreams. For decades, the phenomenon was confined to the margins. Abductees, night visitations, shadowy memories hidden behind silence and shame. Scientists turned away, the military went quiet, and the public stopped listening. But it never left. It just changed direction. In the early 2000s, something began to stir. Not in bedrooms or rural roads, but in restricted airspace. Not to civilians, to pilots, operators, commanders. The phenomenon had returned, but this time it wasn't subtle. It wasn't ambiguous, and it wasn't shy. In 2004, off the coast of California, trained Navy aviators encountered something impossible. Something that moved like no known aircraft. That dropped from 80,000 feet to sea level in under a second. That had no wings, no exhaust, no explanation. They called it the tic-tac, and it wasn't the only one. Encounters followed. Go fast. Gimbal. Unidentifieds over nuclear facilities. No longer dreams. No longer stories. Now data. Captured. Analyzed. Buried. And then leaked. The silence was over. The ridicule was cracking. The military was back in the conversation. And somewhere deep inside the Pentagon, someone had never stopped watching. Now, the world would have to listen. For years they watched the skies and found nothing they could admit. But in 2004, the curtain lifted, if only for a moment. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was conducting training exercises off the coast of Southern California. Suddenly, radar contacts. Objects dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds. appearing, disappearing. No heat signatures, no wings. Two pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich, were sent to intercept. What they saw would change everything. In 2015, pilots off the East Coast tracked multiple UAPs. The gimbal video shows a craft rotating against the wind, locking into position, tilting unnaturally. They're all going against the wind, one pilot says. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Another clip, Go Fast, shows a small, fast-moving object skimming the ocean. No wings, no rotor wash, no explanation. They called it the Tic-Tac. It had no visible propulsion. It moved in bursts, instant acceleration. It reacted to them. It outmaneuvered everything they had. And then it vanished. Seconds later, it reappeared on radar, 60 miles away. Behind the scenes, the Pentagon was investigating all along. AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was a shadow project buried in the defense budget, funded in secrecy, managed by Luis Elizondo. Its goal, to study aerial threats not made by us. But when Elizondo left the Pentagon, he said one thing clearly. These things are real, we don't know what they are, and we're not alone. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense did something unthinkable. They confirmed the videos were real. They didn't know what the objects were. They called them unidentified aerial phenomena. And for the first time in decades, the ridicule was gone. In 2023, Congress held open hearings. Witnesses spoke plainly. There were craft. There were encounters. There were cover-ups. Are they lying? Are they wrong? Or are they finally telling us what they've known all along? This time, it wasn't a rancher in New Mexico, or a woman paralyzed in her bed. This time, it was the military, the intelligence community, the lawmakers. And still, we don't know what we're dealing with. They are not ours. They are not explained. And they are not gone. We spent decades ignoring the stories. Now we have the evidence. The question is no longer, are they real? The question is, what happens now? The military had seen the impossible. Pilots had chased it. Radars had locked onto it. And the world had begun to listen. But those objects, whatever they were, came from here. From Earth's atmosphere. From just beyond the edge of our understanding. And then, something came from farther. Not from the sky, but from the stars. On October 19th, 2017, something strange was detected by the Pan-STARRS 1 telescope in Hawaii. At first, it looked like a faint speck of light. But this one was moving fast, too fast. It wasn't orbiting the sun. It was passing through. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't an asteroid. It didn't behave like anything we'd ever seen. It came from outside. Outside our planets. Outside our system. Outside our comprehension. Its name was Oumuamua. In Hawaiian it means a messenger from afar arriving first. This wasn't a blurry photo or a forgotten memory. This was data, verified, observed, measured, and still, no one could explain it. Was it rock? Was it relic? Or was it something else? Oumuamua was the first object ever observed to enter our solar system from interstellar space. It wasn't from here, not from our asteroid belt, not from the Oumuamua cloud, not even from the outer edges of our solar system. It came from another star. Its speed was staggering, over 315,000 kilometers per hour. Its path, hyperbolic, meaning it wasn't coming back. It was here for just 11 days before it became too faint to observe. We caught it only briefly. But what we saw was enough to raise questions we still can't answer. At first, astronomers thought it was an asteroid, then maybe a comet. But it had no tail, no coma, no visible gas or dust. And yet, it accelerated as it left the sun. That's not supposed to happen without outgassing, like steam from a boiling kettle. But Oumuamua showed no visible outgassing at all. It was tumbling end over end every 8 hours, unlike anything we'd seen before. Its shape was even stranger. Estimates suggest it was either a long, thin cigar or a flat pancake-like disc. Neither shape matches known space rocks, and its reflectivity, highly unusual, shiny, metallic almost. Astronomers in Hawaii named it Oumuamua, which means a messenger or scout from afar arriving first. Fitting, because it came without warning and left without explanation. For a few short weeks, we watched it. We tracked it. We measured it. We ran the numbers. And the numbers didn't make sense. It wasn't just unknown. It was unprecedented. Whatever it was the first, and maybe not the last. It didn't behave like a comet. It didn't look like an asteroid. It accelerated without propulsion, and then it was gone. In the vacuum left behind, speculation rushed in to fill the silence. Some scientists suggested it was a shard of cosmic ice, hydrogen ice, evaporating invisibly, or a sheet of nitrogen, chipped from a Pluto-like world in another system. But no one had ever seen such objects before. And even those theories required unknown processes from unknown planets. Then came a theory that shattered scientific comfort. Avi Loeb, Harvard astrophysicist, suggested Oumuamua might not be a rock at all, but a probe, a light sail, possibly built by an intelligent species. A paper-thin structure, propelled by starlight, explaining its mysterious acceleration. Loeb argued, we shouldn't assume it's natural just because we want it to be. We'd never seen anything like it before. Why pretend we had? Others went further. What if it was dead tech, a probe that drifted too far from its creators? A relic from a civilization long gone? Or what if it was intentional? A message in motion, a seed sent across stars, a buoy on the edge of someone else's map. It changed course just slightly. It didn't spin like debris, and it reflected light more like metal than stone. Was that design? Or coincidence? And if it was designed, by who? In 2023, astronomers observed another interstellar object, 2I Borisov. That one looked like a traditional comet, but that only deepened the mystery. If Oumuamua was different, it wasn't just one of many. It was an anomaly. One looked familiar. One did not. We may never know what it was. It never sent a signal, never turned back, never changed course again. It came uninvited. left unexplained, and reminded us the universe is older than we are, bigger than we understand, and quieter than we expected. But sometimes, something moves in that silence. It was fast. It was strange. But was it alien? Not everyone thinks so. In fact, most scientists don't. The first explanation: debris, a chunk of rock or ice ejected from another star system. Planets collide. Comets break apart. Gravitational forces can slingshot matter across light years. Oumuamua, they argue, was one of these ejected fragments, flung into space eons ago. Its strange shape, possibly the result of millions of years of cosmic erosion. An ancient shard, tumbled smooth by time and radiation. Another theory: solid hydrogen ice, made in the coldest, darkest regions of space, beyond our ability to observe. This material would vaporize invisibly near the sun. That would explain the object's acceleration without leaving a visible trail, like a comet with a cloak. But critics point out, we've never observed hydrogen ice in nature, and it would likely sublimate long before reaching us. Finally, some scientists suggest non-visible outgassing. Maybe it released superfine dust or molecular gases like carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, too faint to detect. These could produce the small acceleration observed, without forming a traditional comet tail. But that requires just the right conditions, the right spin, the right timing, and still, no one saw it happen. In science, the simplest explanation is usually the best. And for now, most researchers agree. Oumuamua was likely natural, an object shaped by time, space, and chance. Alien. Unlikely. Unusual. Absolutely. The mystery may never be fully solved. We saw it for only a few days, from millions of kilometers away. But whether fragment or sail, relic or rock, Oumuamua made us look again. Upward, outward, inward. In the end, it reminded us that we're not alone in the universe, even if the universe remains silent. What if it wasn't a ship? Not in the way we understand ships. What if it was a signal, a probe, a scout, not here to speak but to listen, or worse, to map? Some believe Oumuamua was a survivor, a broken fragment of a machine left behind by something that no longer exists, or something that does, but chooses not to reveal itself. Others believe it was a seed, a dormant machine, unaware, until it passed close to something alive, us. What if it activated? What if it's sending now? The universe is vast, but it is also old, and in old places things may sleep, or wait. We imagine aliens as explorers, scientists, curious travelers, but nature is not always curious. Sometimes it is predatory. What if we were never meant to notice Oumuamua? What if we weren't being visited, but scouted? Some believe it wasn't the beginning. It was the aftermath. A message sent across time, not to us, but to those who came before. A beacon of ruin. A warning in motion. Like a black box drifting from a crash, no one survived. Or perhaps, Oumuamua didn't find us. It chose us. We used to think we were alone. Now we're not so sure. We thought we understood the sky. Then something passed through it and left no answers. We measured it, named it, watched it vanish. But in the silence it left behind, a question remains. What else is already watching?